Welcome back to the 2017 NRA show, and welcome attendees. And this is the Veridian booth, and this is the Just the Facts segment. I'm John Sheehan, head of law enforcement sales for Veridian Weapon Tech, and I'm joined here by Mark Walters. Thanks for coming back today, Mark. Mark was here yesterday.
Appreciate it very much.
And we've been talking today a lot about personal defense, and not just what happens when you pull the trigger, but everything that happens afterwards.
It's a mess.
It's a mess. It's a mess.
It can be a mess.
Defending yourself doesn't end when the person is down that you've had to defend yourself against. That things continue after that.
Correct.
I know you know about that too, and if you'd like to extrapolate on that or impart some wisdom to the folks about how you feel about that as well.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me after Mass Ayoub. That's kind of a tough act to follow. Besides, he's the expert.
Yeah.
You know, he's been a long-time guest on my show for the very reasons that you had him here. He explains it better, I think, than anybody else. And if anybody's ever had an opportunity to take Massad Ayoub's Mag 20 or Mag 40 class, by all means do it, because you'll learn everything he talked about. And he discusses it in ways that he wouldn't necessarily discuss here, right to the point. But I also like talking to, we started a new segment on the show called Legalese, where we're bringing in some of the greatest self-defense attorneys in the country. Andrew Brank is one who's roaming the halls here. If you get a chance to meet him, say hello to him. These guys will tell you that what happens afterwards is what's going to change your life.
It's true.
It's what happens after the fact, because you don't, people think, look, I'm the good guy. I mean, look at me. Do I look like a gangbanger? Right? You know that. You showed up at scenes. Yeah. And doesn't everybody know I'm the good guy? I mean, look at the guy laying down there. Clearly, he was wrong, and I'm the good guy. I mean, look, I've got a nice car. I live in a nice neighborhood, right? Like we were talking, I live in a gated community. I'm not the bad guy. Well, guess what? Somebody saw something different than what you're describing to you when you show up. Somebody heard a scream, or somebody saw something that you didn't, and now is telling law enforcement that. And guess who called 911? The criminal, or who should be the criminal partner called 911. And as law enforcement, who looks at the 911 call as what?
Well, the dispatcher counts that as the Bible, and then that comes over the MDT to the officer, and the officer just reads what's going on or hears it over the radio and already has a preconceived notion about what's going to happen.
And the 911 caller is the victim.
Yeah.
We view the 911 caller as the victim. And you've got to know this when you go in, and the way to do that is understand that these things can happen to you, particularly when you don't expect it. So what I mean by that is, I don't know how many times I have to write stories of people. I've written 2 books on the subject. I've talked to more victims of crime who were caught off guard, who were ambushed, who didn't think it could happen to me, and all of a sudden found themselves talking to law enforcement and found out, hey, I'm being interrogated here, and I didn't do anything wrong. Now, in most of those cases, no charges were filed. But the fact of the matter is, you better know what you're doing. You better visualize it. Think about it. If you carry a firearm for self-defense, you've got a gun on your hip right now. I have a gun on my hip right now. And you better damn well believe that I've thought what could happen when I walk into a room, or what could happen if I walk into whatever situation I'm in. What happens, God forbid, if I have to use this firearm? Because I've had to pull my firearm before. And it unfolded in probably 35 to 40 seconds. But that 35 to 40 seconds changed my life. And I'll tell you some mistakes I didn't make, or mistakes I made in hindsight. I didn't call 911.
Yeah, that's a big one.
I was in a car at a traffic light, dark tinted windows in Florida, in a brand new BMW. I'm the nice guy. These other guys are blocking traffic. They're trying to get into someone else's car. But thank God nobody behind me saw the firearm pointed at 2 people and maybe came up on that scene after what instituted my response. And now look at me. There's a guy on, I'm at a traffic light on Fletcher Avenue, and this guy's got a gun on 2 people.
Exactly.
Guess what happens at that moment in time?
You become the suspect.
You're looking for me on my way to work after that traffic light goes, and I'm staring at a possible 3-year, minimum mandatory 3-year aggravated assault charge.
Sure, because somebody got your license plate.
Because somebody's got my license plate. They don't know what happened. Now I'm on the receiving end. Now I'm the one needing an attorney, because I've got to explain what happened. You know why? Because I didn't consider that may have happened. I should have called 911, and I didn't, and I absolutely should have. And, you know, I go back and I look at what happened to me in hindsight, and I think, wow, I made some mistakes here. I'm very fortunate that I didn't have to pull the trigger. Thank God I didn't have to pull the trigger. Make no mistake, I would have pulled the trigger.
Absolutely.
And I would have continued firing until those two individuals had stopped what they were doing and approaching my vehicle, because I was going home to my 2-week-old daughter that day. And I make no bones about that whatsoever. I sleep very well at night. I never lost one wink of sleep because of it. Thought about it many, many times over the years, and I would do a few things differently, but those things would have been done after the fact. I would have called 911. I wouldn't have moved. Maybe I would have pulled off into the gas station. If anybody's familiar with Tampa, Florida, I was right at that notorious intersection where the Todd Theater is. Maybe I would have pulled over into the Todd Theater. You're shaking your head, so you know where I was at. I would have pulled over and called 911 and waited it out. And it's crazy. I don't know if anybody did that day. I don't know if anybody was I have no idea. So,
yeah, you know, self-defense, like we said in the last hour, doesn't end when you pull the trigger. That's just really the beginning, because you still have to think about self-preservation after self-defense. And that's what we're trying to get through to people here. And we're not trying to scare people. We're just trying to tell them what the reality of the situation is. That after you have to use self-defense, if you're the one that calls 911, and you're the one that's relaying the information to the dispatcher that in turn is relaying it to the police officer on the radio or the MDT, and they're getting that, well, that's the story that they're getting. So the chances of them being more receptive to you and less offensive to you when they get to the scene are greater, because they know you're the one calling it in. So it's so pertinent, it's so important for you guys, if were that to happen, to get that out. Call 911, explain what happened to the dispatcher, explain what you're wearing, explain that you still have your weapon, but you've holstered it. We don't want you putting that on the ground.
Make it, when you call 911, understand that call is being recorded. Now, I know Mossad may have covered some of that.
Yes, we covered it.
Okay, but that call is being recorded. And there's a very good friend of mine, dear friend of mine, by the name of Alan Corwin. Many of you may know Alan Corwin from gunlaws.com. He wrote a book, The Perp's Hot, The Gun's Not, Now What? And it's all about the 911 call, because that call is being recorded. And as you know, anybody seen a 911, heard the 911 tapes on the news? That's going to be you.
Yeah.
They're going to be asking you questions. That tape is going to be made public. And so how do you defend against that now, today? Envision what could happen to you today. What am I going to say if this happens to me today? Don't find yourself in a position all of a sudden running at the mouth, having never thought about it before. Probably better than 30% of gun owners, at least that I've talked to over the years, that I've interviewed, that I've written about in stories in the magazine, and for that matter in my book, both of my, they've never thought about it. They walk out their door with their firearm every day, and guess what? I'm safe, man. Like if the gun is a magic talisman, and it's not. It's a tool that can get you in an awful lot of trouble if you don't know how to use it and use it effectively. And you better know these things. Study. There's nothing better than Mossad Ayoub's books. And I've got to push. My buddy Andrew. I've got 2 books out. I want, if you get a chance to read them, Lessons from Armed America and Lessons from Unarmed America, where I tell the stories of people who found themselves in the worst situation of their lives ever, like that. Literally in the blink of an eye. My cousin was getting out of his car, putting golf clubs into the back when a gun went to the back of his head. He spent the next 7 hours kidnapped on an odyssey that he knew he wasn't going to survive. And he had to make a decision when he ran out of money, because they cleaned out his ATM. 7 hours they had him. Driving him around in his car, forcing him to drive with a gun to the back of his head. Laughing at him the whole time, taking him through crack houses. They knew when he was done and out of money, he knew they were going to kill him. So he made a conscious decision. I've got to tell them I own a mailbox, etc., which he did. And I'm going to take them to the shop and convince them that that's where the money is in the cash register, because he had a gun under the drawer in the cash register. So he made the decision, I'm going to take these people to my facility and I'm going to kill them. So when was the last time you thought like that? Probably not. But you should. What could happen to me? That this can happen, and it does happen to good people. And if you live in a gated community, your house can get robbed, by the way. And tornadoes do hit gated communities, too. Just want to point that out. We were talking a little bit about that. People think this can't happen to me. It can happen to you, and if you don't believe it's going to happen or can happen to you, it probably will. Because evil finds people like you who don't think it's going to happen to them. They're looking for that. So if you go in there and you have the knowledge in advance, I'm carrying a firearm, I know how to use this, I've trained with this, I'm capable of using it. Ask yourself that question, are you capable of firing a projectile into another human being? Are you?
Yeah.
You are.
Yeah, I am.
We know your story.
Yeah.
I know I am. I now know I am. But I'll be honest with you. I didn't know if I really was. On November 17th, 2002. On November 18th, 2002, I found out I was.
You know, when I used to take cops right out of the academy and you get them in field training and you're supervising them and you put them with a field training officer, one of the first things that they teach a baby cop to do is visualize. Visualize every possible scenario. If you get ambushed in the car, what are you going to do? Be thinking about that as you're driving around. Every possible scenario that could happen to you. What's wrong with doing that if you're a civilian? You should be doing that on your own. Well, that's not paranoia. That's self-preservation.
Look, let's go to our friend Rob Pincus. I have to stop you for just a second. Rob Pincus is famous for saying one time on my radio program, and I quote him a lot on this, is it being paranoid to think what could happen when you walk into a restaurant? Are you the guy that sits with the back into the corner? Okay, Rob tells us it's not paranoid to be aware and to look where the exits are. It's not paranoid to think what's going to happen if somebody walks in this convenience store and tries to rob this clerk. Because you're carrying a firearm, that's what you need to do. Right. And he says, I'm not talking about paranoid to the tune that you have to put your back to the door in the back seat so that you can see everything and read from the Braille menu, all right, because you don't want to take your eyes off of anything. You don't have to go through your life paranoid. You just need to be awake, and you need to have thought these things through. They taught you that as part of your training.
Absolutely, they teach you that.
There are law enforcement officers around the country who are not with us today because they didn't do that. Two of them come to mind down in Tampa, Florida. You may remember the case down there a number of years ago. But two detectives, 30-plus years on the force, man, polished guys, know what they're doing, have worked the mean streets. Had a guy who accidentally, they thought, shot his 4-year-old stepson. They were walking him back to the car. They handcuffed him in the front, put him in the back of their unmarked cruiser. Little did they know that around the chain on his neck was a handcuff key that he was able to get at. Both officers are dead. He went right over into the shoulder holster of one of the officers, pulled his gun, shot the driver as the other officer was coming over the back seat, shot that other officer, murdered them in cold blood, went to the back of the truck, or the back of the car, firearm out of the back of the car, carjacked somebody driving by who had just shocked and seen this happen right in front of their faces. Okay? Their lives are changed forever. Took off up the street. A Florida state trooper was later murdered when he got out of the car during the chase. He stopped. These guys, and I don't want to blame the officers for that, but there were techniques that were changed in Tampa, Florida, and the way officers around the country did business because these guys made a mistake.
Well, it's one word is actually complacency. They deviated from their norm on the tactics because they believed one thing when really another thing was going down, and they became complacent.
And that complacency, were they not thinking that this could have happened to them, that they had the guy handcuffed? The point that I'm trying to make, envision everything you can. Our Homeland Security Department does it every day. What could these terrorists do next? Right? Imagine 50 guys in golf carts that have a gas can bomb. Would you ever think of anybody, an old couple driving down the street in a golf cart? Well, I see them around my neighborhood all the time, right? And I don't live in a gated community. Gated community's down the road from me. But it's kind of innocuous. Was that set your radar off? That's your baseline behavior Peter always talks about? What if 50 of those things went off at the same time in neighborhoods across the country and 500 people were killed? Okay? Does it sound crazy and ludicrous? Yeah, it probably does. But I just thought of it. Right? Who else can think of it? The point being, visualize these things, and if you do, you go through life a little bit more protected than the average guy you're walking around next to who is literally, utterly clueless. And that's what most people are. Don't believe me? Walk around here for another few hours and see how many people stop in front of you. Notice how many people are on their phones. Don't care about the person behind them. You bump into them. I know you're doing the shuffle out there. I do it too. And it's enough to drive you crazy. But keep your eyes out and watch, and you'll see how many people are clueless. Don't be that person.
And on that line of conversation that we're talking about, the visualization, like we said, doesn't just stop at the end of the shooting. The visualization continues through, what do I do now? And how do I let the good guys know I'm the good guy? And that's where the visualization continues. So you don't get complacent. You don't just assume, like those two cops did in Tampa. You don't get complacent. You don't assume. Right. You follow through and you continue with those steps, and you visualize exactly, if this happened to me, what would I do? Because if you train your mind you will fall back to that training even under stress. You've just been through a traumatic situation. You've taken somebody's life. You've pulled the trigger. Your heart's going to be racing. Your mind's going to be going 1,000 different directions. And to try to focus, you can do that if you've trained yourself. If you got nothing to fall back on, then you're going to be screwed. But if you've already thought that through and mentally trained yourself and prepared yourself for that, you're going to be so much better off by the time the police do get there. And you know, you get into that. We've also talked today about how important it is in this day and age. You and I talked yesterday about how we've become complacent because of the new administration. And our complacency is our downfall there, and that really we could still, if we're in an armed encounter, be tried by the court of public opinion, by the court of the media, and by maybe an overzealous prosecutor that's trying to make a name for themselves.
Let's go there. The media is going to crush you. Anybody who listens to my radio show knows I hate the media. I don't make any bones about that at all. The mainstream media hates you for being here. They hate this. They hate that it's here. And they hate everybody that's in this building. Make no mistake about that. And if you have to use a firearm to defend your life, and they're capable, or they can, they're going to paint your attacker as the poor, downtrodden victim who grew up without a dad, whose mom was an alcoholic, who made a bad choice and ran with the wrong people, and that's how he met you. And gosh darn it, you took his life. Or you put him in a wheelchair. I've talked to too many people who have been in fights. I've talked to too many people who have survived. I've talked to too many people who have been ambushed. And I can also tell you, after, John, when you're talking about visualizing after the fact, you're also going to have a splitting headache, the likes of which you've never had before. Oh, yeah. Your adrenaline dump is going to come off of you, and it took me about 15 or 20 minutes, and it's going to hurt to the nth degree. And you're not going to be able to concentrate. And it's not something you want to find yourself in that position. You don't want the media coming out. You don't want not know what to say. You don't want to know. You want to know how to say it. You want to talk about it in your own head and have these answers ready. And you want to be able to do it while your head's splitting, because they're not going to give you a break if they're questioning you. Okay? So the key is think through everything. And then yesterday we were talking, it's probably a good opportunity to talk about Lee Michaels up in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. What do you do when you do everything right? You have thought about it. You have visualized it. You did notice the guy. He didn't fit in. And you got safely into your garage, and lo and behold, all of a sudden you've got a gun to your head. Because sometimes it happens. Sometimes you can't stop evil. Sometimes evil's going to get the jump on you. And you know what? Some people won't survive it. So why do I tell you that? Because you have to have the advantage over it. You have to know in advance, yes, again, this can happen. I can get ambushed. You ever walked outside and something surprised you? And you didn't know it? You're walking to your car, you're doing everything right, and lo and behold, I don't know, maybe it's a car backfire, or maybe it's somebody that you didn't see, and you think to myself, my God, where did he come from? Right?
Right.
In a parking lot. What if that person had ill intentions come at you? Would you have been able to stop it? Probably not. You know what? Susanna Hupp made the comment when the two of us did a Fox News John Stossel show a few years ago. She said, by being aware, by having my firearm, by being aware of everything around me, that changes the odds. And it changes the odds in your favor. As long as you can change the odds in your favor, the possibility that you'll survive the encounter is a good one. And hopefully you're alive to tell me that story so I can talk about it with you on the radio and other people can analyze it and benefit from it. And you're not dead. And that's the key, is to accept that there are people out there who would prefer you dead simply because they want what you have on. Think about that. And
to throw a little cop wisdom in there from my end of it too is, if you haven't read Lessons from Unarmed America, the Lee Michaels case that Mark is talking about was a gentleman that was very prepared, but he didn't take into account one thing, that if there's one, there's two.
Right.
And he saw the one, but he missed the second guy, who was the real primary aggressor. The one was the distract, the second guy was the primary aggressor, and that's one thing cops always think about when they go into any situation when they're confronted by one person, that if there's one, somewhere else there's two. Just because you've taken down one or protected yourself from one, you still need to be wary and keep your head on a swivel looking for number two. And that was where Lee got caught, figuratively speaking, with his pants down, because didn't plan for that second guy. Saw the first guy, had a plan, never saw that second man.
And something else I want to impart to you also, and I'm glad you brought that up. Imagine yourself pulling into your driveway, okay? Mental exercise, right? Theater of the mind. You're pulling into your driveway. You ever done that before in your car? Imagine 10 seconds later being on your knees with a firearm at the base of your neck with a guy saying, I'm just going to effing do him right now. 10 seconds later. Think about that. That's what happened to Lee. He simply pulled into his garage. 15 seconds later, no more than 15 seconds later, he found himself in his driveway on his knees with a loaded gun at the back. His wife right upstairs with their kids. You know what went through his head? My God, she's going to come outside and find me splattered all over the driveway. How did I get here? How did I get here? You want to avoid it. Point being, sometimes you can't.
Exactly.
You can't. So you have to be prepared for it. Lee was unarmed that day. Lee has never been unarmed since that day. So take away from it. Is his gun a magic talisman?
Nope.
Is it going to ward off evil? Is it going to keep that guy from coming out behind the bush? Probably not. But he's trained for it now. And he's visualized, because now he knows it can happen because he found himself. And I want you to think about that. What would you do if you were walking back to your car and all of a sudden got put down on your knees like that by somebody who wanted what was inside your vehicle and had a loaded firearm at your head? That's how fast it happens. Nobody says, hey, I'm going to rob you right now. Get ready. If you need to make any phone calls, let's do it, right? No. It's right now. So just be prepared for that. I don't know. That's just advice. And if you listen to the radio program, Armed American Radio, you'll hear experts talk about this all the time. We try to get this message out. I'm a big fan of the preparation, avoidance, awareness. Always have been. Prepare to avoid by being aware. It's your number one tool, I think. And
then post-shooting the other way, just, obviously, I don't have a dog in this hunt, but think about insurance. Think about the insurances that are afforded you now as a person that's able to carry as an armed citizen. And definitely it's worth your $200 to $300 a year. I mean, I personally have a AB-218 I can carry anywhere because I'm a retired law enforcement sergeant and I retired with my credentials, so I can carry anywhere in the United States. I still have it because you just don't know. I mean, because I could get tried in the court of public opinion just as easily as I could get exonerated, but you do need that. And in addition to that, and this is my shameless plug for my company, is we also have these great camera systems that are coming to market, these FACT camera systems. There's FACT Duty, which is actually filming Mark and I right now on these two weapons. You go around the corner, there's FACT Micro and FACT Compact, which are available for commercial purchase and will hold hours and hours of video, and it's HD quality and their sound. And what better way to prove that what you did was right than to have that actual video evidence when you broke trigger of that suspect.
I want to make a point there, too. Let me stop you for just a second. I have a camera in my car, and it also proves when you're wrong. Yes. Don't forget that, okay? Yes. If you got the sound on it, you might, I don't know what your personality is, but it was best for me to turn it off, okay? I went back and watched a couple of the videos, and I thought, man, I think I'm driving a little bit too aggressively, and I don't like what I called that guy. Yep. Yeah, all right, so you need to be a little careful that those things work both ways, too. But when you were talking about post-shooting, court of public opinion, somebody that I've gotten very close to over the years has been George Zimmerman. People say his name and they want to dodge. Oh, my God, he's going to talk about George Zimmerman? What a nutcase he is. This guy can't stay out of trouble. George Zimmerman's life was destroyed, ruined, forever because of the court of public opinion. He's no different than any one of us. And the jury found that to be the case. By the way, a mixed race jury found that to be the case. And the court of public opinion still comes after him.
And the media.
And the media. And it's never going to stop. I know personal stories about George Zimmerman that I would never tell here. Suffice to say, the man was doing probably what you would have done earlier in the day, and look what happened to him in that split second. Think about that. Think about that. Very important. And did he handle it right after the fact? The court of public opinion turned on him a couple years later because of some incidents that he found himself in, but has never been charged with. Everybody says, oh, he's just getting himself in trouble. The fact of the matter is this stuff follows you for life. Ask him if you ever get a chance. It was at the Gun Rights Policy Conference last year, too. Had a lot of a lot of people had an opportunity to talk to him and found out, you know what, he's not a bad guy. That could have been me. That could have been me. I don't want to wind up like George Zimmerman. $3.5 million in debt, can't get a job, and everywhere I go, people hate me. And all I did was defend my life. So be aware that these things can happen.
Yeah, keep in mind that could be any of us that could happen to. You know, I just remembered, I forgot to ask you, we got you all prepped for your BBC interview yesterday. How did that go?
I bailed.
You bailed on it, really? No kidding.
Yeah, I was supposed to be interviewed by the BBC yesterday about Trump's speech. They wanted to talk to me prior to the speech, and then they wanted to talk to me after the speech. I didn't get the message about prior to the speech because the time change was, I didn't see the email until it was too late. So we set up an interview for 8:15 yesterday, at which point I got to thinking, you know, it was going to be an argument that I didn't really want to have with a bunch of British people who I don't really care about. I care about here if it was an interview here. But yeah, so just long story short, the interview, we bailed on the interview.
Probably better that you didn't do it.
Yeah,
then,
I just didn't feel like having. I wanted to go out and have dinner with some friends and not worry about having to get into an argument at 8:15 at night with you know, some snarky Brit like what's his name, Piers Morgan or something like that. I just wanted to have dinner.
Yeah, I don't know how you do that. Like, have you ever?
It's very difficult.
Have you ever gotten a request for a media interview where you know going in that you're going to get zinged, whether it's MSNBC, CNN, or whoever it is, and you just know
you disarm them
ambush.
immediately. You disarm them immediately.
You know, is that your strategy? How's that work?
Be extremely nice. They think you're going to come in yelling and screaming at them. It throws them right off. They don't know what to do. When you all of a sudden, like, man, this guy was a nice guy. He didn't attack me.
Wow.
You know? So you just be really nice to him and disarm him.
That can be so hard.
You talk about the media. I'm glad you mentioned that. Remember, guys, the media is going to want to talk to you after an event like that. How many people have ever been interviewed with a camera in their face? Have you? Okay, it's intimidating. And guess what? Everything you say lives forever today. All right, the minute it's over. So.
And don't post anything to social media.
Stay off of it.
Get off your Facebook, get off your Twitter, if anything like that were to happen to you. And then keep in mind that everything that you've posted to social media prior to your shooting is also discoverable too. So that if you've got any anger issues that we all get, that we post something to Twitter that maybe we shouldn't have.
Well, you know,
or
you
Facebook.
heard the great Mossad Ayub talking about the Punisher, stupid people, you know, put a Punisher on your firearm. That's the gun that I want the media getting a handle. Look at this guy's a nutcase. Yeah. And you know what? They're going to convict you on that. It's a done deal. Yeah. You're not going to walk away from that. It's going to happen. It's a done deal. But understand something. I mean, put yourself in my shoes. I talk about this every day for a living. All right? Have you ever heard some of the things I've said on the air? Right? You don't think that's going to come back?
Possibly.
I pray to God every day. Nothing else happens to me. That happened to me a number of years ago. Because everything I've said, everything I've written about, everything I've talked about. Now, I could obviously use, because we teach people not to find themselves in these positions. We teach people to avoid these situations. But we also teach people how to deal with these situations effectively and end the situations. Okay? My overall, I think the bigger overarching point here is that the media is going to want to talk to you. And understand that. Plan for something like that. Think about this. Yes, you can be robbed. Yes, you can get hurt. Yes, you might have to shoot somebody. And yes, if you do, somebody's going to want to talk to you about it. How am I going to handle that? Don't ignore it. Don't sweep it under the rug and say, I've got my gun on. Nothing's going to happen to me now. That's when you need to be thinking about it. And quite frankly, if you don't do that, you might want to reconsider carrying that firearm. I think that's just good advice. You know, if you're not responsible enough to think about these things in advance, are you responsible enough to be carrying the firearm, quite frankly?
Yeah, we could really do a whole hour on the pitfalls of social media in this day and age, and how it's not your friend. You know, that you've got to be just so careful. It's not just the media that's going to dive immediately into your Facebook and your Twitter accounts. It's also going to be the investigating detectives in your shooting too. They're going to want to get a little disposition and background on you as well. They could possibly be used for you in a court
wait a minute.
case.
I mean, I'm the nice guy. I live in the nice house.
Yeah,
I live in a nice neighborhood. They're not going to want to find. I don't do anything wrong.
Again, that's an assumption, right?
Yeah.
That's an assumption. That's complacency and assumption.
I can go to any one of your Facebook pages and I can take something out of context in there and paint you to be a real asshole. And I can do it right now. Right now. Okay? And you're not. But boy, I can make you look like one.
We're getting people jumping on their phones right now. They're furiously.
This will be my last post. This is my last post.
Right.
You know, it's just good advice anyway. Get rid of the damn things. Okay? Stick it in your pocket. And again, walk around. These things are so dangerous today. okay? They get people in more trouble. And I'm a firm believer that when all this is written, when this chapter is over and this book is closed, Steve Jobs is going to go down as one evil son of a bitch. I think, look at what these things have done to our lives, okay? But I'm serious. I want you to think about this. Use it as a tool today. We talk about it in classes and so forth. Walk around and look at everybody on their phones when you're walking around the halls today. Look at them. Look how stupid they look. That's you, okay? And watch how many of them bump into you or aren't paying any attention, all right? Now carry that outside and do the same thing. I fly a lot, so I have the opportunity to sit in airports and watch people utterly clueless because of these things. Put them in your pocket. Enjoy what's around you. Live in the moment. Nothing on the topic here. That's just my. I wanted to go there. I'm in my I hate my phone mood today.
That's quite all right. That's quite all right. Well, hey, Mark, we're going to cut it here.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much for coming back. Big hand for Mark Walters, people. Thank you very much.